Fragments of silicon. They can be a little bit taxing.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me, as always, are Galix and Petty. And let's get into things. Petty, why don't you start us off this week? How is your health doing?
I feel old.
That's probably never going to change.
Oh, yeah, no. Especially seeing how I'm going to need a knee replacement. Yeah, no.
I mean, are you still suffering from the dours of irritable bowel syndrome?
Yeah, but it's not been bad enough to, send me to the ER again.
That's more what I was looking for.
Yeah. And also, I think my knee's been getting worse, because the more therapy I'm doing, the more it hurts. So that's generally an indication of a problem.
Right.
So I see the knee doctor in a few weeks. And I guess see we're gonna go from there since insurance won't cover the gel shots. And I don't have $2,000 per shot.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't your insurance cover that?
Nope.
Unfortunate.
Yeah, they'll cover surgery for cartilage, basically to rebuild the cartilage in my knee, but a shot for a gel substance to help protect it and maintain it, nope. Sometimes I don't understand insurance.
See, the point is for them to pay you as little as possible.
Yeah, you would think that, even if they were like $2,000, the gel injections would be cheaper than full surgery.
Guess not.
World may never know. So yeah, that's been fun. Still been playing through Cyberpunk. It's an interesting beast. I kind of don't like the way the story's handled, but with how non-linear it is, I understand why it feels off at points, but at the same time, still kind of irksome. And, yeah, other than that, not a whole lot's been going on.
All right. Alex, it's your go.
Well, apparently we're getting some rough weather at the end of this week, which I'm not looking forward to. But let's see. Macross went well last week, or this past Saturday with Mac, or Sunday. We managed to actually do 2 stages and started early, so hopefully we can continue like that. I actually beat the main story of Pokemon Scarlet this past weekend.
Woohoo!
So I still have a little bit more to do, but...
So that means I'm going to be hitting you up for the rest of my Pokemon to my decks then.
Yes, I have access to more things now.
Good.
Because you're kind of semi-locked. And also, you can't even get all the paradoxes your first time down.
Yeah.
I thought you could get most of them except for the super double fancy one, but nope, only 2.
Yeah, I don't even feel we let you try and catch them until most of the way through it.
Oh no, you can catch them because there are Screamtail / Iron Bundle and Fluttermane / Iron Jugulus are pretty common wild encounters in like the latter half of the climb down. And those are all catchable.
Ah.
But you don't see what is it? Iron Hands / the Paradoxamungus until you open the lab at the bottom. And you can't catch that then. And then I think the other two you don't see until the final boss fight. But they're apparently around afterwards. So yeah, the next thing I have to do is go fight all the gym leaders again. So we'll see how that goes. And Splatoon has been progressing normally. I don't think there are any big events coming up. And that's about all I got.
Guess it's my go then. Let's see. Now, I'm going to see my doctor tomorrow, mainly due to how do I put this? Constipational issues.
Oh, fun.
Not really. Like something wasn't fun the other day. I won't get into details,
Yeah.
but
I probably have an idea.
it might be different than what you might be thinking, but let's just say there was cause for me to want to call up the doctor because honestly, I've been oscillating between things for a few months. Like personally, I think it's my medication.
Yeah.
Like, could be dietary, but I'm like, this started when I started taking my medication. Like,
well, medicine does have side effects.
Yes.
Especially
And
diabetic medicine.
And so I need to see what I can do about that. And still 2 weeks before I see the orthopedic hand surgeon. Nothing's really changed on that front. The new compression gloves seem to be working better, as in they fit better. And let's see, on the gaming front, played a fair bit of Ty the Tasmanian Tiger this week. Which is the most average platformer that could have existed in 2002.
Sounds about right.
As in, this game came out in 2002, and was pretty average for the age, and is still pretty average for this age. Like an HD coat of paint isn't really fixing its fiddliness. Well, maybe that added to it. I never played the original version, but it's definitely one of those platformers that you might have seen in the bargain bin, though did have some shocking amount of success. As in, they got 4 games out of this franchise, and which is more than a lot from that era can boast. Anyway, I kind of got bored with the whole affair. So I switched over to Castlevania Lords of Shadow Mirror of Fate HD.
That's the 2D one?
Yeah. It's definitely a shadow of, your average Metroidvania title. Not sure how long I'm going to stick with this one. I suppose that's my news for the week. So, merrily we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us once again is Stephen Frost from Digital Eclipse.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Well enough,
Yeah.
let's
Well
say.
enough. Yeah, well as can be.
Like, maybe not that far, but still well enough.
That's good.
Anyway, right. So let me see where to start. Like, I suppose before we get to the main event, there is a side project collaboration thing that I want to mention. That is, you had a hand in developing a Garbage Pail Kids title, or rather, Digital Eclipse. I don't know if you were attached to that particular project.
Yeah, I did work on it a bit. I at this point, since I'm sort of head of production there, I actually have my fingers in pretty much every project. But I kind of started the early phase of that project, and then basically handed it over to one of the other Digital Clips producers to kind of finish it. But yeah, I was along for the ride on that one. It was kind of a neat one. It was kind of a neat concept of like, playing this little bit of a joke of like this lost kind of game, NES game, lost to time. And I don't know if you saw like sort of the mockumentary kind of trailer that was put together and things like that, but it's all tongue in cheek about this game that no one knew if it existed or not, and things like that. And now here we are, decades later, and you're able to play it. So it was kind of fun. It was a fun collaboration with I Am 8-Bit and.
Right,
yeah.
and the full title of this is Garbage Pail Kids, Mad Mike, and the Quest for the Stale Gum.
Yes.
Yeah. And God, if you don't know what Garbage Pail Kids are, how to explain this?
What you get when you combine Cabbage Patch Kids, which was very popular at one point, with the gross things are cool.
Yes, lots of vomiting,
the 90s.
Vomiting and bodily fluids and things like that.
So yeah, instead of being endearing young children, they're gross little horrible creatures.
Right.
So little children.
And they
but you're emphasizing that part. It's the difference. It's the difference between a picture of a kid dressed up for Easter or whatever, and a kid in the playground with visible snot dripping down its face.
Yeah. Or something along those lines. Like,
I'm pretty sure that's literally. Also, they had horrible pun names.
Yeah,
yes.
Like probably maybe not face of the franchise, but I know the most popular one, Atom Bomb. If you like, it's not just the horrible pun, but it's him pressing on a button and the nuclear explosions coming out of his head and he's smiling. That's the Garbage Pail Kids in a nutshell. Like,
yes, yeah, exactly. So
same family of humor as Mars Attacks, and that one that's basically the same as Mars Attacks, except it's dinosaurs from hell.
I know the thing that always struck me about the Garbage Pail Kids is it always seemed like it came out a decade ahead of the curve. Like, when I think of gross out humor, I really think more of the 90s than the mid 80s. But this thing was a product of the mid 80s, and it was popular enough to get things like a movie, which I would not recommend anyone watch.
We didn't say a good movie. We said a movie.
Yeah, and it was going to get an animated television show, but
then they thought better of it.
Well, and it sort of did happen, as in it's complicated by the fact that it came out in other territories, but it was canceled a week before it was supposed to come out. And we actually interviewed somebody who worked on that once. It was apparently really horrible, as was the movie.
On the on the release, there's actually it was released some years back, but there's actually included in the modern console versions a sort of stop motion short movie that's actually fairly entertaining.
Right.
But yeah, so it's you can get the game on modern consoles right now. Actually, I just noticed today. There's a little plug that it's part of Sony's sale, so I think it's only like $7.50 on today or for this period of time for their big sale that's going on right now on Sony platforms. But there is an actual physical cartridge that there was a pre-order period of time for that will actually come out for your Nintendo Entertainment System later this year or in the coming months. So yeah, if you're the sort of collectible type, you can actually get the game on an actual NES cartridge as well.
Yeah, and I believe that's coming out via IM 8-bit.
Yes, yeah, this was a collaboration with them.
Yeah. And the Digital Eclipse have a hand in doing like both versions or just the modern stuff?
So we did sort of the wrapper. So Retrotainment did the actual NES game. They're this team that they do a lot of NES and kind of classic games like that, mostly predominantly focused on the NES. So they built the actual game themselves, and what we did is sort of put it in a wrapper where we added additional content like the level maps, the videos that were accompanying it, some behind the scenes stuff. We have an art gallery that shows kind of like the Garbage Pail Kid cards in relation to how they're represented in the game and things like that. So we took the NES game and we made a digital product out of that with some additional content, so people could play it on modern systems. And then if you happen to still also have an NES cartridge or system, you can buy the NES cartridge and play it on the old original system as well. But this modern version has some additional quality of life stuff like reducing the flicker because of the sprite limits and filters and things like that. So things that you normally expect in sort of these things that help boost up a little bit. Rewind, so in case you fail, because it is a platformer, an action platformer. So if you're falling to your death, you can use rewind and save states and things like that. So your typical quality of life improvements that you want to do to make it easier to play through the game. And also there's a watch movie that we made as well, if you're familiar with that, where you can watch the entirety of the playthrough of the game and then decide when you want to jump in and take control of the character. So that's part of it too.
Right. And like I don't remember what I was right. So like, are the Garbage Pail Kids in the game like based off of actual Garbage Pail Kids?
Yes, yeah, all of them. And we actually show in the gallery section of the release, you can see what the Garbage Pail Kid card looks like, the original art, in comparison to what they look like in the game, because you can actually go in and play as multiple Garbage Pail Kids, and also interact with other ones, because there's you can collect the cards and abilities, and you're also switching between characters, because all the different Garbage Pail Kid characters that you can play have different abilities, and so you'll want to switch between them depending on the scenario that you're in.
Really? And is that on both the modern and the NES?
Yeah, yes, the core game is similar as far as the ability to switch the characters and stuff like that. So that's definitely the same stuff. Yeah. And also, we just released or we're about to release a updated version of that, a patch of that game that includes an updated version of the NES game that has a variety of bug fixes in it. So I'm sure they'll announce that soon on social media, but it's going through approvals right now, but there'll be an update to that in just a short while, actually.
And what are the Garbage Pail Kids doing in this action platformer? Like,
well, they're trying to, without spoiling too much, they're trying to collect the pieces to build something. And so you're basically going through the levels trying to find it. It's your classic kind of NES sort of action platformer. It's a little bit also like maybe like a DuckTales or Mega Man, where you can choose which level or where you want to go first. So it's not completely linear. You could go to Japan or another area you can kind of choose. And then you also have the flexibility in switching between characters. Like, there's a guard spell kit that allows you to jump higher and things like that. So that might help you with the platforming. But the basic gist is you're trying to go through and you're trying to collect the pieces to be able to build something. And I don't want to spoil the story in relation to that. But you're basically trying to go to collect these pieces to build something important.
Okay. Well, I mean,
It's cool.
sounds...
if you're a fan of like sort of that old school NES kind of platformer action game, it's right up people's alleys, I think, and the ability to switch between characters and their abilities is kind of cool. You can buy certain cards that give you certain attributes and things like that too. So it's pretty cool experience overall, I think.
How big is the game on the NES?
You mean like lengthwise?
I mean, file size wise.
Oh, trying to think of. I don't know offhand. I'd have to look it up. I'm not quite sure. It's a pretty big game though. Like, I think it definitely pushes the hardware to some limitations. But as far as the actual file size, I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, because from what I've seen, this looked like one of the later stage NES games.
It would definitely, it definitely is. It's definitely pushing the hardware quite a bit, I would say.
Yeah, there's a lot of let's say homebrew developers who are trying to push the limits of what can be done on the NES these days.
Yeah, exactly. And we try to balance it out because when you push the original hardware, you get things like sprite limitations and flicker and stuff like that. And so, fortunately, in our emulators, we can eliminate that, and so you can still have the larger number of sprites simultaneous, but without the flicker. And so, I think it's a nice balance of of pushing the hardware, but also getting the benefits of some of the modern quality of life improvements that people expect.
Indeed. I know some people like having the sprite flicker retained.
Yeah, you can. You can leave that on if you want to.
I never liked the sprite flicker. Not back in the day, not now.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, it's the same thing with the Cowabunga collection, the original NES games. Konami really pushed the number of sprites in a lot of those NES games with the Turtles stuff, and so you get a lot of flicker in certain areas. So I think it just makes the experience so much more enjoyable and just
it's fun. Important for verisimilitude for some people,
right?
Because it was a very real hardware limitation that a lot of games had to deal with. But also getting rid of it is pretty much objectively an improvement of the experience.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So that's the thing with us. We always give you a choice. So however you want to play it, that's how you can play it.
Right. Anyway, so moving on to the main event, so to speak, we got Atari 50, the anniversary celebration, which I believe we did touch upon a bit last time, but now the game is out, and there doesn't need to be tiptoeing about what might be or not be in the game, at least on the ground floor.
Right, exactly. And we just actually, literally just a couple hours ago, I was finishing pushing them, but 3-4 hours ago, we actually just released an update to it as well today.
Right. Well, I suppose we should go into that first. What got updated in Atari 50?
There's a bunch of stuff, but the main thing that we try to do now, or we have been trying to do, especially starting with Cowabunga, is really listening to the audience and the people who are playing the game and the things that they would really like to have, and within reason, of course. We get some people say oh, we'd love you if you had 60 more games, which is just sort of unrealistic. But for the people who are sort of requesting features or changes or bug fixes that make sense, and multiple people are sort of stating this, we try to listen to them and implement it as best we can. So some of the stuff is directly correlated to that, such as dip switch settings. So when we released the arcade, the original base Atari 50 with the arcade games, we didn't have dip switch settings. We kind of go back and forth about some of that stuff in relation to representing it from a default settings perspective, how you would have seen it in an arcade situation, right? Which normally arcade operators would set things to default settings. In some cases, it makes sense to not include them because either the options are a little confusing or unnecessary or don't really add to the experience. But we felt that the dip switch settings for Atari 50 were a good enough benefit to make sense, and people had requested it as something that they would have appreciated, and so we added them to all the arcade games that actually had dip switch settings. Not all the arcade games actually had dip switch settings. So we added that. We added, just a lot of different bug fixes. Another major thing that we added, because sometimes we also just want to improve the product, and it isn't based off of what a person, suggested from the public or anything like that. It's actually just us thinking about like, oh, we really would have loved to have included this. And so one of those things is a 60 hertz mode for Tempest 2000. So you can actually go in and choose between like the console accurate Jaguar, performance of Tempest 2000, or we kind of unlock that, and you aren't hampered by the limitations of the hardware. You're just, because the game itself is doing more than the Jaguar hardware can handle. So it's waiting a lot. And so, we went in and we did a lot of just like, okay, let's unhook the sort of the limitations, the past limitations of the Jaguar, and let the game run like it's supposed to want to run. And so we added a 60 hertz mode for those who want to play like that, which is amazing. It's a night and day difference, I think, for most people to play that in 60 hertz mode. So that's sort of like some of the stuff that we added to sort of improve overall quality. There's other things that we do just for purists or diehard folks, where you can now launch the reimagined games directly with a command line. So if you have an arcade cabinet, for example, that you have with a PC and you want to play like Vector Sector or something else, and you want it to like be able to boot up directly into that game and then exit out of that game when you quit and bypass everything else, you can do that now by a simple command line. Because some folks had like, oh, I got this arcade cabinet. I'd love to be able to have like Vector Sector playing or Neo Breakout playing or whatever. Just have that only playing. And so you can do that now with command line stuff if you want to, which is kind of cool. And then there's just a variety of different other just bug fixes and stuff, improvements in general, and like the 2600 game variation selection system, just cleaning that stuff up. There were some missing pages to some of the stuff. Like there was some comics, like I think it was Earthworld comic book was missing a couple pages, and so we fixed that and things like that. So it's a balance of like bug fixing and then also quality of life improvements. Like the things that I mentioned.
And I don't know if there's been enough time for it yet, but have you gotten any response back from the patch?
Oh, it literally just went out like 3 hours ago, so I haven't really had a chance to look yet. Fair so enough. It literally hot off the presses like 3 hours ago. So, yeah.
Wow, is that new?
Yes. I was, this afternoon was focused on like getting that out to all the different platforms. So, yep.
And that's live for everything now?
Yeah, it should be. I haven't had a chance to check Xbox yet. Xbox sometimes takes a few hours to push live. So it may be out on Xbox. If not, it should be out pretty soon. But the rest of the platforms, it's out for sure.
And, okay. So let me see. So that's where this is now.
Right.
And I feel it's time to rewind back to the beginning. In, how did this project first come about? Like, did Atari approach you?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a mixed bag. So, like, we have a lot of back and forth. We have just communication with a lot of companies in the industry. Like, even if we're not working with them, people talk to us a lot, or we talk to them a lot. There's a lot of like people reaching out to us to say like, hey, do you think you could do this or this? And and we're also actively, because we we are pushing more towards doing a lot more of our own projects and our, in our own releases, and not necessarily relying on external publishers and things like that. We want to do more of our own publishing, and take a lot of that stuff internally now, instead of relying on folks. So we're in a transitional period from that perspective. But like I said, we're always talking to folks. People know what we do and sort of the stuff we are good at. We've had relationships with Atari for a while, this new sort of generation of Atari, the folks who work there. And, we were just casually talking and kind of came this thing where like, oh, Atari, this is Atari's 50th anniversary. We have a lot of stuff that we're doing for Atari 50, new games and releases and things like that. But it'd be cool if we could do something special to kind of, cap the year with, and sort of like make it memorable and sum up, Atari and what it's gone through and where it's going and things like that. And, basically everyone on the team, and this is, I think this is sort of an interesting thing that I bring up all the time, is that for pretty much every digital Eclipse release, we always have at least a couple people who are very passionate about the particular IP. The rest of the team obviously still put forth the quality and love to make these products what they are, but there's generally at least a few people who are fundamentally either very well versed in the IP or really love it or really passionate about it. And I think that's what helps us create great products. What's interesting about Atari is that every single person on the team has a very passionate love for Atari, like every single person. So that allowed us to like create, I think, something really special when every single person is like enamored with Atari, wants, to tell the story of Atari, wants to participate in the history of Atari, and things like that. And so during the course of these discussions and just early on, we're like trying to figure out what we're going to do. And I'm like, well, we should definitely do some sort of release, some sort of collection, to like we've done in the past, whether it's something like Cowabunga collection and things like that. And as we kind of, figured out that we doing something and working together, we started shifting a little bit and changing our minds in like what we were trying to make and what we wanted to do. Because originally we were thinking like, oh, we've got to focus on the games and get as many games in there and things like that. But we came to the realization that, Atari has released quite a number of collections over the last few years and multiple times through hardware, right? Their flashback hardware and things like that. So a lot of the games, especially the 2600 ones, aren't necessarily special anymore, right? They're not going to surprise people. It's not like Turtles where there's a ton of people who haven't played Turtles games since they originally came out, right? A lot of time has passed, because they haven't been released in any sort of retail package since that time frame. But Atari has been releasing a lot of their games, arcade and 2600 ones especially, over the last decade or so plus, right? So there's been a lot of like people who've already played that stuff. So we're discussing, we're like, yeah, I guess the games can't necessarily be the focus on this, because people aren't going to inherently just come for the games. I mean, the games are important, but we have to build this sort of release on something else that's important. So it kind of all clicked, and we're like, you know what? This is the 50th anniversary of Atari. It only comes once. Let's focus our attentions on telling the story of Atari, and then treat the games and everything else as just as tools in order to help tell that story. And so that started to get people, quite excited. Like, okay, well, how do we do this? We're kind of experimenting and trying to figure this stuff out, and how do we represent this, and how do we present it to the player, and all of these other things. And at that point, while we were still unsure of what we were making, we knew that we were going to work together and build something out of it. And so that's sort of where we, formally kind of said like, okay, let's do something. We want to do it for this year, before the end of the year, sort of as a final, again, capper to Atari 50. The end last hurrah for the year. And then we kind of went from there and sort of worked together to try to do something sort of special. And then it kind of went from there. And the challenge with that, and I'm sure we can talk about it because you have other questions, but like the challenge with this project was again, like we didn't want to just focus on the games. And it wasn't until much later into development that we had sort of this epiphany where, like, well, what if we did not actually take people directly to the games like we do in past releases, like, you know, Disney or Cowabunga or whatever? Normally, when you boot up in those games, the first thing you see are the actual games themselves, the list of games. In this one, it's like, what if we didn't take you to the games? What if we took you to the museum, quote unquote, museum section? Excuse me, museum section. Like, what would that be like? And then how would we represent that? Because what we've done in the past is, like, you know, galleries, and we've told context some of that, but we haven't organized it. It's like, well, what if it's a timeline? And so it became this sort of organic sort of design and back and forth and trying to figure out how we were going to present this stuff. And then we eventually came to this idea of these timelines that we could use to tell the story of Atari. And then we then said, like, well, okay, just like, you know, screenshots and press releases and videos and stuff like that, games are another aspect of that. So we need a way to be able to jump to the games quickly and jump from them so that you can digest all of this stuff very easily. That was the key sort of mantra. Is like, you know, you need to be able to digest every aspect of this collection very quickly and easily. And that's going to be very, very sort of important. And so that's what kind of helped to inspire kind of the end design of it, and sort of the timeline structure and how things were sort of built. And we just went, you know, we felt that was the right direction, and we went full bore into, like, kind of developing that. But even until the very end, we weren't sure if it was the right decision. You know, we were concerned that, like, people wouldn't get it, that they would buy the, you know, the collection, and they would boot it up and they'd be like, wait, what is this? Where's the games, right? Like, what's going on? And so we were a little bit concerned, but fortunately, when the first reviews came in, and then we started getting nominated for stuff, you know, awards and everything else, Game of the Years and things like that, it really felt good. The team really felt good because we're like, okay, people get it, what we were trying to do. They understand it. And then, you know, it kind of just blew up from there. So that's a long response, but that's basically, yeah, how we got to create that.
Let's see. Certainly not the most conventional approach, but I've seen the museum aspect done in other collections, like the Midway Arcade Treasures comes to mind. Like,
right. Yep.
But I think what separates this from even other museum pieces is the enormity of the scope.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think so. I mean, we had so much stuff, and I think there's so much material for Atari. You know, we spent a lot of time finding it. There's so much. Obviously, it's 50 years of stuff. Like, you can't include everything. It's impossible. So you have to sort of curate it, and I think that's the thing that we try to get across. Like, you know, even the games list. You know, the games is 103 games, which is a lot of games, but you easily could have put 200 games, 300 games on there, right? But that's not the point. The point was to be able to tell the story of Atari and then figure out the things that would help you to tell that story. And anything else that took away from that or distracted from that wasn't, you know, valid to sort of include. Because, and we also feel that, like, when you include like 200 games, 250 games, they start to lose the value a little bit, and people aren't going to pay attention to them. So we really... It was an interesting thing because, unlike other Digital Eclipse collections, where we know what the games list is going to be pretty much at the very beginning, outside of maybe a few examples, but, like, normally on day one, we know exactly the games that we're going to be including. With Atari, that kept fluctuating. You know, even early on, we weren't even sure if we were going to have more than 50 games. We were thinking 50 games for 50 years, and that was it. But this was before we really dug in and started to write the story and kind of scope out, like, what we want to do and how we want to split it up into multiple timelines. And so that game list started growing and then shrinking, and then someone said, like, okay, well, we can't use that one for legal reasons. Okay, that's gone. So what do we replace it with? And you're like, oh, that one technically has some issues with emulation. Okay, let's get rid of that one. What about this one? So we're constantly, during the course of development, having these meetings, the entire team, and talking about, like, okay, we should have this game because of this reason. this game for this reason. So every game in the collection, specifically 103, like are all there for a specific reason because they help to tell an aspect of the story of Atari. And that's something that I always try to get across to people when they say like, oh, why didn't you include this or this or this? Obviously, they may have been legal reasons, but really fundamentally, it's because we wanted to focus on the things that needed to be there to tell the story and have it so tight that like people who buy this will want to go through and check out all the games, even for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And I feel that like if you had 200 games, that would never happen. People would just like jump around, they wouldn't check it out. You know, there'd be 100 games that no one would even touch or things like that. So we really wanted to make sure that all aspects of it, the art assets, the videos that we did, everything were easily digestible and there for a specific reason to tell sort of a specific story.
I mean, mind you, like 103 games is quite a lot in and of itself.
It is, but it's sort of, you kind of need that to really hit all the major platforms, right? And also cover fundamentally the key games that people sort of expect to be there, but also the one-offs, right? The game that was built by this person who for the first time, or did this for the first time, or did this for the first time. And so that's sort of how we got to that number, right? And it also includes the reimagined games, so you know you can take 5 or 6 away from them. But fundamentally, you know, every game there is specifically for a reason. And you know, up until the end, we were cutting and refining it and adjusting it. You know, so it's very, very deliberate and very curated.
Right. And before we go deeper into the games, another aspect of what you've got laid out here is system. Because I know a huge selling point of this particular collection is the fact that it's not just Atari 2600 games.
No. Yeah,
it's almost everything that Atari put out. You know, the Atari 5200, the 7800, the Jaguar. You know, even delving into their computer lines. I'd say like the only thing that's really missing here is the Atari ST.
Yes, and that was deliberate because we were starting to work on the Atari ST emulator. But when we looked at the games that we, in time, with the time that we had, that we could get the rights to use and that were not already duplicates of games on other platforms, the number that was low enough to not make the time and resource required to develop an ST emulator worth it. So we put forth the energies into improving other things and adding to other stuff. But we did start on the ST emulator. We just, during development, felt that it wasn't worth it to complete it because of the reasons I stated.
Interesting. Like, and unfortunate. Like,
well, I mean, unfortunate from the standpoint that, like, maybe, let's say, if we, and I just say this in a you know, general scenario, but like maybe let's say we finished the ST emulator and you had a few ST games, but you only had one Jaguar game, right?
I don't think I would. I'm like,
or something like that.
I don't, like, ooh, that's.
And think about it from the standpoint that the Atari ST games that you have, most of them would be duplicates of games that are already there.
That's perhaps the bigger issue because, how do I put this? The Atari Jaguar was kind of cursed when it came to its game library.
Oh, true, but it's a very important aspect, like a huge aspect of Atari's history, right? And it's important to tell that story. Yeah.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. There's immense historical value in the Atari Jaguar. It's just, you know, it didn't get a whole lot of good games due to a whole myriad of issues, like in between, like the Jaguar's architecture, the time constraints, the difficulties in programming. Like some of the Atari Jaguar games lack music because of the particular way the coprocessors were set up, for example.
Yeah, trust me. We hold. I mean, obviously, we understand that because we built an entire Jaguar emulator from scratch. So,
Right.
which is never been done to the point of where this is the first time a Jaguar emulator has ever been released in a retail product. And that's no slight against the people who have worked on Atari Jaguar emulators out there. They've done great work, but unfortunately, none of them are up to a level of being accurate or performant enough to work on a release, like a public release. So we had to build that. And that was the key thing about Atari too, that most people, why it was such a huge endeavor, is that every single emulator in this collection is new to Digital Eclipse or built from the ground up specifically for this collection. And it's the most emulators we've ever integrated into a project, like ever by far. It's like a substantial undertaking. And even when people think about like the 2600, when I say it earlier, like, oh yeah, 2600, people have done that and stuff like that. It's nothing special, but we haven't done 2600 in modern history for us, and so we had to build. We had to start that from scratch, from the perspective like we had to go through and find all of all the permutations and variations of the games and how to trigger them and what they do when you switch between one game mode and another. And because, as you know, the Atari 2600, some of those games have like 40, 50, 60 game variations, right? So being able to build the systems to be able to switch between those and present it in an intuitive way was something we had to build from scratch, from us to do it, because we had not done it before. So everything in this collection is pretty much new and has never been done, in the recent realm of Digital Eclipse releases, has never been done before. So it was sort of a monumental undertaking in that regard.
How many people worked on Atari 50? Given the
What's that?
emulator.
I'm trying to think of how many people. Let me think. One, two.
Perhaps another way of phrasing it is, were there more people that worked on this than other Digital Eclipse releases?
Yes, it is the most recent. It's more than even Cowabunga Collection. And Cowabunga Collection was quite large in its scope and things like that. So this was definitely larger, and also required from the standpoint that like we have a handful of original games that were built specifically for this release as well. So whereas in Cowabunga there are no new games as far as us creating anything there. So
right.
So definitely our largest team in a while.
That makes sense. Once again, given just the sheer enormity of the things on display here, like
right.
Now, in terms of the emulators, how do I phrase this? Do they have the potential to be used again? Just for the sake of supposition, say Activision approached you about doing a classic 2600 set. Could you use the emulator that you built for this package in that potentiality?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. That's why we do it. That's why we build it the way we do it. I mean, the whole point of us is trying to in our way of preservation, like making these games accessible again to people, but also not only that, but also making it so that future platforms, we can bring it over to them as quickly and easily as possible. So as long as hardware doesn't fundamentally drastically change completely, like when the PS6 comes out and the next Xbox come out, we could technically, if Atari came up to us, it's like, hey, we want Atari 50 release on those platforms, no problem, right? We could do it pretty quickly. And that's the whole point of our technology and architecture and sort of our game engine layers, it's like that. It's to be platform agnostic and allow us to be able to utilize it across multiple links. Just like, that we did Atari 50 for the VCS, which is a completely new system. We've never done stuff for the VCS before. And
that's
so,
like the Atari micro console type thing, right?
Yes. Yep. Exactly. So that has its own system, own store, everything like that. And so that was a new platform for us. And so we ported everything over to the VCS and got it out on there. So yeah, that's the whole point of us building this stuff. If we're investing in building a Jaguar emulator or things like that, we're definitely going to reuse that in the future if the opportunities arise. Just like we reused Super Nintendo emulators, NES emulators, Genesis emulators, everything like that.
Okay. And which emulator was the most difficult to build?
Oh, the Jaguar by far. I mean, no one has done it before, right?
No one has done it before. Clusterfucked hardware that the Jaguar was. Yeah, I can believe it.
Yeah, it's no one like I said. We unfortunately have Rich Whitehouse, who is the creator of that. It is the only Jaguar emulator that has compatibility with every single Jaguar game. And not only that, but the fact that it's performant on a Switch is amazing. And not only that, but we were able to do stuff like I said, Tempest 2000 in 60 hertz mode on the Switch is just a testament to his ability to make stuff that's very optimized. But yeah, I mean, we evaluated what was out there in the Jaguar because we knew it was important that we wanted to do it. We weren't sure if we were going to be able to include a Jaguar emulator because it is a difficult system to emulate, and we didn't know how long it was going to take and what problems we'd come across, and even if we could do multiple games. And so we started out with an exploratory thing and said, like, well, okay, there's nothing out there that we can really utilize to the point that would work within our systems, and so we have to build it. And so we spent a time, Rich started testing it to see if it was even feasible, and then we kind of did baby steps. Like we said, okay, what if we made an emulator that was just good enough to run Tempest 2000, right? At least then we can include Tempest 2000. And because it's that's the game that everyone expects you to have if you have a Jaguar, if you're releasing including Jaguar games in anything.
It's one of a handful, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is by far, if you were to take a vote, that would probably be number one in most groups. Like, if anyone were to say, like, what's your favorite Jaguar game? I'd say 9 times out of 10, Tempest 2000 would be it.
It's either Tempest 2000 or AVP.
Well, yeah, okay, but AVP is a licensing, license that's not even feasible, from a licensing perspective, right? So,
that's actually a complicated chain of licenses because, Atari licensed it from Activision and all that.
Didn't we go through this with Stephen Kick and he was about to rip his hair out trying to go through this clusterfuck?
Sometimes licensed games end up that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you wholeheartedly that, in Atari 50, we would have loved to have more licensed games, but it would have taken a whole army of effort. To give you an example, I spent 2 months trying to get a screenshot and some text cleared, and I still couldn't do that.
I believe it.
2 months for a screenshot and some text. So imagine that on a larger scale, how much time you'd need to get clearances for stuff or even pursue, much less including an actual game in it, right? A licensed game. Imagine how long that would take. We could be spending a year just trying to get some licensed stuff and not making progress on the actual release, right? The actual project. So that's an example I sort of give of how tough. And you also have to remember that 50 years, some of these games are decades old, and there's a lack of clarity on who actually owns all the parts of it, right? We came across situations where people or companies who, and I might have said this before, who thought they owned the rights to stuff but actually didn't. And then there were people who didn't think they owned the rights to stuff, but we found out they actually do own the rights to it. So that happens all the time. But when you have 30 years of time, 40 years of time, right? People leave. There's no one at the company anymore. Things have been sold off, but maybe they weren't sold off clearly. So maybe the rights were the only rights that you have is that you can release this version of the game. You can sell it, but you don't own it, right? Or things like that. So
especially
there's
back
a lot
in the day when console and arcade rights were split.
Yeah, it's a huge challenge, and people know it's a challenge, but it is a huge challenge. That's why I pick up that example of one screenshot in a paragraph of text taking 2 months and still not getting the approval for it as a context. So imagine if I said let's go try to get 10 games approved to include, right? How long would that take? So not that we don't want to, but it's just we had to we only have a finite amount of time. Our number one goal is to tell the story of Atari, and so that's what we really sort of needed to do. But going back to your question about the emulator, the Jaguar for sure. And so, like I said, we initially said, okay, we're only going to focus on Tempest 2K initially, and then we go from there. But Rich worked endlessly for months and months and months, and he got it going, and he got more games running. And then he got the performance good, and then he just worked his butt off. And he's I love that guy to death because he really one of his bucket list items was to really like to do a Jaguar emulator, and he got a chance to do it. So we're so happy that we were able to include that, in this celebration and actually provide to people who never owned a Jaguar at least a taste of like what that era of Atari was like.
Right. Because not a lot of people actually experience the Atari Jaguar.
No, or the Lynx or things like that. It's like if you did hang out with Atari, you did spend time with Atari. You did it like decades before that, right? You were either doing the 2600 era for a lot of people who are older, or a little bit after that. But there's a huge gap that there were a lot of people who just, didn't do anything with Atari, and then eventually came to around the Lynx or Jaguar time, and there was some interest, but not a ton.
Or they might have had experience with one of the other Atari, like Atari games, or
software. Yeah, exactly. They may have known it from like the game developer publishing, on consoles some time ago and things like that, or arcade iterations in arcades and stuff like that.
Yeah, or the post-Atari Corp Atari, the Atari Groms.
Right.
Atari has had many different faces over the years.
Yep, very much so. Yep.
Yeah. And I suppose that does lead me to a question in that regard. Was there any attempts to include like the post-Atari Corp history in this package?
Well, we evaluated like everything that we could. I mean, as you can imagine, 50 years is a huge amount of time to try to consider what you cover and things like that. And we just discussed everything and what felt important and what didn't, what made sense given how long it might take us to try to get rights clearances on it. And we went down a lot of roads, like I said earlier, we went down a lot of roads trying to actively pursue stuff to see if we could include A, B, or C, or this and that. And it was so much time investment to even just find people who we could talk to about that stuff. And oftentimes those people were unsure of like rights and stuff like that, right? And so it just became really challenging. We spent so much time just trying to like confirm, things that for sure, or even artwork, music, like everything. It was so much just overhead work that is such a fundamental challenge to do with these sort of releases, and sometimes it's manageable because the games themselves, they're only 10 years, 20 years old. But when you have stuff that's like 30, 40 plus years old, it's like Indiana Jones, right? You have to go in and try to like dig for what it is. And in the end, really, you have to play it safe. And if you're not 100% sure that you can get the rights to do something, then you can't do it, right? So you have to really be 100% sure. And there's a lot of times where we would have loved to include stuff where we were like 80% sure that we had covered all the bases, but that 20% is a large amount.
That 20% can cost you thousands.
Yes, exactly. So we just had to be sure that was, and also we had to build up this very large platform that I talked about, all these emulators, and that we tried new things and this new timeline approach. There was so much that we had to take on. It was a bit overwhelming, and we didn't have a ton of time to do it in. So.
Yeah. And, is it really worth getting the Atari 2600 version of Pac-Man into the collection? Like,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things, even like if you talk about the history of you talk about the Nintendo games that are there, right? The Donkey Kong on the different Atari platforms and things like that are sort of like important things to call out, but you would never get Nintendo to approve them. And same things with like E.T., and or even the Activision stuff, the things that people equate with Atari but aren't Atari, like the Pitfalls, and stuff like that. We would love to include that, but for the reasons that I've stated and things like that, it just wasn't possible. Would we have loved to include them? Of course, we would have loved to include them if we could. It just didn't work out. at the time.
No, I am not surprised at all that it didn't work out. We have many friends in the retro gaming community, and this always comes up.
Yeah, it's tough, unfortunately. And no one thought about this. No one thought about 30 years ago that we'd have to worry about like legal clearances for a game, in the 30 years into the future, right? So.
No. Ask Miss Pac-Man about it.
Right. Oh yeah.
You mean Pac-Mom, right?
Yeah. Miss Pac-Man's another classic of canceled sort of stuff that happens. That's a little bonkers, but yeah.
Yeah. I've explained that situation on this very program, and it's quite the legal knots.
Yep. Exactly.
But anyway, getting back to the Jaguar, I do have to ask: were there any attempts at emulating the Jaguar CD?
We wanted to, and actually, Rich has already said this is probably that his next goal for that emulator is Jaguar CD. But we didn't have time to do based off like what I was saying, to try and just get the games up and running and perform on Switch and stuff like that. We really just focused on the base Jaguar thing. But he is actively now working on Jaguar CD.
And I'm not sure how much you could get into it, but is there a vast gulf of difference between a Jaguar CD emulator and a Jaguar emulator?
I don't think it'll be a drastic. It's building upon it. So I think it's just understanding how the two interface each other and what additional hardware is in the Jaguar CD that games could rely on and things like that, and potentially extra memory and things like that. I think it's more the fact that like the biggest challenge for Rich was actually just getting an actual working Jaguar CD at a decent price, right? And so, but fortunately, I think he's one's coming to him, or he already has it, and so he's been looking at it, and part of his future tasks and stuff like that, he's investigating that. But I think it would probably be pretty straightforward. I think the base Jaguar hardware is the really complicated one, and then adding on Jaguar C support should probably be relatively more straightforward than what the base one was.
And one day soon, the virtual light machine shall live again.
The virtual light machine.
I mean, that was the best part of the Jaguar CD. I'm not even joking. It was basically the Windows music visualizer.
Right.
Before.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, people love their music visualizers for sure.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it was the first of its kind, but it was certainly.
I don't think so, but yeah, I don't think so. But it's definitely.
Anyway, so flipping the coin on this discussion, were there any games that you included in this package that you were surprised you could have access to?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I was glad that we got cleared to include as many of the Jaguar games as we did, because like I said, up until a while, we were only playing through Tempest 2000. We weren't sure if we were going to be able to get rights to, or who had the rights to a lot of the Jaguar games. And so there was a huge influx of Jaguar games that we were able to include at the tail end of it, fortunately, to some discussions that went on at Atari, and we were able to get those in. But for a long time there, it was only like Tempest 2000 and maybe Tempest 2000 like Fight for Life or something. But that was it. So there was a couple Lynx games and a couple of Jaguar games that came in at the end, and I was really happy with that, because especially for the Jaguar, because we put so much time and energy into the Jaguar emulator, to have it go out with only like 1 or 2 Jaguar games, so it just made me sad. So I'm glad that we were able to work out some stuff and get more of those games into it at the at the tail end.
Yes, now everyone can experience the joy of Club Drive.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing that I would have wanted to, like, people asking, like, I wish I would have we would have had more time to pursue and include more homebrew stuff, like you had sort of talked about a little bit earlier. Like, we got Yoomp in there, which is, sort of a homebrew, which is an amazing game if you haven't played Yoomp. A very talented team of guys. But I would have loved to have just reached out, done a homebrew section that was representative of like all the different platforms and what people have been working on in relation to that stuff. If I could rewind time and figure out a way to do that, that's probably what I would have done, because it kind of shows you like where Atari came from and then what people are doing now. And you can kind of juxtaposition that, like how things have progressed and how games are being made now and things like that. So I would have loved to have more homebrew, like a homebrew section for the different platforms, and been able to share that with the world.
Makes sense, because the Atari Jaguar has a very burgeoning homebrew scene, because
people are crazy. I mean,
no, there was a specific incident that happened in 1998. That was Hasbro, when they bought the Atari brand and everything associated with that, released all the rights to the Jaguar CD. Yeah, so you could make an Atari Jaguar game free and clear. You didn't have to go to the rights holder to make a Jaguar game, and people have been doing that ever since. Now it's been happening on like the NES now that like the NES patents have fallen by the wayside. But people have been doing this on the Jaguar since basically the Jaguar died. So it's it's a very robust homebrew scene given the platform.
Yeah, and I'd looked. There's some cool stuff on Link. I mean, every platform that we included, there's a lot of great stuff. Like I said, even there was some great Link stuff. There's some amazing Jaguar stuff. There's even like conversions. People port over Atari ST stuff to the Jaguar quite a bit, and release it on cartridge. So yeah, like I said, I would have loved to been able to like have a section of just homebrew games for each platform. That would have been awesome. But yeah, unfortunately, it didn't work out.
Once again, I'm sure there was a whole bunch of stuff that you wish you could have done, like, other examples come to mind. Like Atari Soft. I don't know if anyone remembers Atari Soft, but that was their label for publishing their games on other platforms.
Yep.
Like, for example, and so on and so forth. Or, and I'm not sure how you would have ever been able to do this, but like Atari had a pinball division.
Exactly. We talk a little bit about the pinball in the history stuff a little bit, but it's there's no way to really do that.
Key games. There's a rather unexplored section of Atari history.
Yep.
And the list just goes on, as you mentioned. Like Atari, especially back in the Golden Age, had its hands in so many areas.
Yeah, it did. Like you could tell. I mean, we could be doing, we could do Atari 50, like multiple volumes of that, and spend, a year on each thing and cover, large more sections and things like that. That's easily. There's no shortage of games and materials and things like that. Again, it's like 50 years. It's like a ton of time. There's no doubt there's plenty of things that you could do, more of, for sure.
Right. And unfortunately, our time is growing short, because I'm pretty sure we could talk another hour about this package. Because, like, I don't know, if you feel like coming back on a later date, we can do that.
Yeah, I'm certainly open. If there's definitely stuff to talk about, I'm more than happy. I mean, the main thing for this, celebration, that I'm just so happy that people are, have tried it and they understand what we're doing and they're really appreciating it. And what makes me so happy are the people, more so than the Atari fans. Well, I appreciate them. It's the stories of the people who didn't even grow up around Atari. They don't really know Atari outside of like a logo from a T-shirt at a mall, right? But they buy it because they know Digital Eclipse, and they say, like, I want to like understand this part about, gaming history, right? Where gaming came from to a degree, and where the arcades came from, and what inspired, the games that we play these days. And as I always say, it's kind of, there's something learning to, like, the whole design of this celebration is to teach people stuff, but really during development, we learned things too, because when you immerse yourself in like games of this era, which didn't have smoke and mirrors to hide them. Right? There's no FMV or fancy visual effects or anything like that. Basically, you'd buy a game, Atari 2600 game at the store. You'd have this beautiful piece of artwork on the box that you just look at, and you start filling your imagination with it, right? Of like, what is it? What is this game going to be? And things like that. When you got home, it's just lines and blocks, right? And you have to fill in the imagination. But the thing is, that meant that the gameplay, the minute-to-minute gameplay, had to be like really good to keep you engaged. There was nothing else to hide behind. So if it wasn't good, then people moved on, and things like that. So there's something intrinsically awesome to learn about the design aesthetics and what people did back then in order to create these things. And I think that was also what helped to spark some of the ideas by the Reimagine games that we did, because each of those is very focused on a particular kind of different thing. Like whether it's like, one of the engineers loving Sword Quest, so wanting to finish Sword Quest, with Airworld, finally close off that series, right? Or Vector Sector because they love the Vector arcade games, or making Quadratank because that person loved tank and combat and wanted to do a modern sort of interpretation of that, or things like a Neo Breakout. So I think what was awesome, and what I kind of alluded to early on about like how every person on this team really loved Atari, or either grew up with Atari or just been enamored by Atari in some way. I think that allowed us to kind of go off and create these new experiences that wouldn't have probably made it into this sort of celebration normally. But people just wanted to be able to like express their excitement about Atari and what it meant to them in some special way. And that's why we got the Reimagine games.
Well, I mean, we can certainly talk about that at a later date, say March
8th. Yeah, I mean, we can definitely, if it's still relevant to you guys and you guys want to talk about it, certainly. And and if you want to, like, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to bring some of those guys on if you want to talk to them, the guys who actually did those Reimagine games.
Absolutely,
we can certainly bring them.
I mean, because like I said, there is so much stuff that we haven't touched upon. We didn't get into any of the Atari 7800 stuff.
Yeah.
Just to cite one example. This is what happens when you've got such a large package.
Yeah, very, very true. And but I think it's kind of cool to kind of get, kind of like when we did the videos recorded for this, and we talked to the original people who were at Atari. It's one thing that we say it to people, but it's another thing to actually hear it from the horse's mouth, right? To hear the actual Atari employees talking about what it was like to make games at Atari is a completely different experience, and that's why I always support that. So, like, if you're going to talk about the Reimagine games, then talk to Dave Reese and Jeremy about like what their influences were to make Vector Sector and Sword Quest and things like that, and what drove them to build those, right?
Yeah, if they're keen to join us, we'd certainly love them on the program.
Yeah, I'm sure we can probably drag at least one or two of them on. I'm sure they won't mind based off of their schedule. I'm sure they'd love to talk about it. What's that?
Drag them on kicking and screaming.
Oh, no. It's more about their schedule. Like, I have them working on a lot of stuff. This year is very, very busy. Like, last year we only had 3 major releases. We only had Garbageville Kids, Cowabunga Collection, and Atari 50. This year we have substantially more than that. So it's a very, very busy time for us. So,
well, I suppose we can use that to wrap things up for this session. Is there anything upcoming from Digital Eclipse or Other Ocean that you can speak about at this point?
The only thing that I can reveal, and we've already talked about a little bit, is that we are working on another update to Cowabunga Collection that's going to add online again to an NC Manhattan project. So if you're a fan of Cowabunga or you picked up Cowabunga, there will be one more update that adds another online game, and also some additional tweaks and fixes and things like that. So stay tuned for that. That will probably be, unless something crazy happens, that'll probably be the last sort of update for the Cowabunga Collection. But I'm hoping that will come out in the next month or two. But yeah, that's probably the next thing that will be released that pertains to releases that we had last year. So yeah.
Right. Okay then. So we'll end things here and pick up in March. And yeah, that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. The week ahead, let's see. Got to get to the right page here and the schedule. Right. So coming up on Friday, January 20th, we'll be having Sebastian Moriarty, and we'll be featuring his game, Heart in the Dark. On the Sunday reviews this week, we'll be covering Plantera 2, The Golden Acorn, The Forest Quartet, Iran, and Running Ninja. And in about 5 minutes, like maybe about 20, if we're being honest here, we will have a new installment of Moonhawk Studios Presents, and that will be a special, call it a crossover episode with this show, in the sense that we'll have a guest that we'd usually feature on this program, the developer of the NES escape room game Nescape, which we just covered this past Sunday. Anyway, so until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.